Hello, everyone. Welcome into another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Thursday, September 26th around here, and we have a great show for you today. It is a little bit different than I was expecting it to be, but we are going to talk about that Matthew Sluka-UNLV Saga, and the first segment, we're going to break that down for you guys because got really complicated really quickly in the last couple of days. So I'll try to break it down, make sure you guys know exactly where they stand behind the scenes with Matthew Sluka, and then on the football side of things, because that is an important part of this. And then we'll get into a little talk around Georgia at Alabama, the biggest game of the season thus far, maybe the biggest game of the entire season, depending on the way you look at it. So a huge game over there in Tuscaloosa. I'll give you my breakdown and my pick that I feel okay about, at the very least. And then we'll go not UNLV, Illinois, going up to Penn State for a big-time matchup that could really set them up for kind of a Cinderella run in the Big Ten, and then Penn State just trying to get back on the right track, get things moving in the Big Ten, and set themselves up for a lot of success this season. Then we'll do a little bit of a whip around, get to all of the other top 25 teams, well, not all the other, but the other main ones that I want to talk about, and definitely want to cover one that maybe you guys aren't expecting in that segment. Then we'll get to my hot takes for this upcoming week, including, I think we're going to get a lot of points down there in Baton Rouge, Louisiana this upcoming weekend. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat at the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page. You can click that $sign, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have a fun back and forth here. Sometimes the chat goes just a little bit quickly, so that can be a little bit easier. Also, the GSMCpodcast.net page is still up and working if that's a little bit easier for you and does the exact same thing. But let's go ahead and jump into this craziness, because the last couple of days on Twitter, all over college football media, have been a little bit all over the place, and it's all around this one guy over there at UNLV, which is a little bit crazy, right? But the quarterback over at UNLV, Matthew Sluka, has decided to leave the program after 3 games. They're 3-0, have wins over Houston and UNLV. Very talented player, more of a runner than a passer, and we'll get into that towards the end of this, but he is leaving the program. He says it's over NIL disputes, saying he was verbally promised a minimum of $100,000 from a UNLV assistant. That's his story. That's what they've been sticking to from the second that this came out. So that's kind of Matthew Sluka's side. He's saying that he never received any NIL money. Sounds like he might have gotten $3,000 of the $100,000, but they were more of a relocation fee that every player gets. So not necessarily anything crazy. He was a transfer from Holy Cross, so obviously had to come on over and move everything. So a lot of things are happening in this. But the bare bones is he thought he got a certain amount of money, or he was verbally promised a certain amount of money. This is what he's saying. He was verbally promised a certain amount of money, $100,000. He only got $3,000. That is the long and short of what his case is. That is the long and short of what happened around his side of this. For UNLV, they're coming back and saying that they never agreed to a $100,000 figure with Sluka. They never got into that. They said even they were introduced to his agent a month ago, and they were informed that he was not registered in the state of Nevada, so they couldn't necessarily do a lot of business with them. They couldn't sign contracts. Sounds like it was thought for a time that he couldn't sign anything until he was enrolled. That is no longer the case, with something that came over, I believe, earlier this year, kind of putting away all of the NIL stuff, at least for the time being, as we get closer to that house settlement. So a lot of things going on here. They said they never agreed to $100,000. They talked about $3,000 on a monthly basis as a recurring payment. They never agreed to that. They then obviously left the program, and Matthew Sluka is looking for a new home. And there's a lot of rumors here that I kind of want to get out in front of real quickly. There's a rumor that he got all the money that he was promised, and from UNLV's perspective, that's kind of what happened. But there's a story that he got everything that he was promised, then came back to Barry Odom and said, my market value has gone up, so I deserve X amount of dollars. I don't think that's what happened here. And it's not to say that from UNLV's point of view, that's not necessarily what happened. It's just from Matthew Sluka's point of view, he was coming to get the money that he was already promised. From Barry Odom's point of view, he was not promised that money, because Barry Odom was not the person that promised them the money. So it's a really, really complicated equation, but the reality is Matthew Sluka is a very talented player. He is leaving the program. That is a very big deal, and it adds to a number of different things. There's also a rumor that he got offered from a Power Five or a bigger Group of Five program for more money. I'll be totally honest with you guys. There is not many teams in the entire country, especially at the Power 4 level, that are kicking the door down halfway through a season to get a guy that's completing 43% of his passes. It's not necessarily to talk bad about Matthew Sluka as a player. I think he's a very talented player. There's maybe a couple, and they're not very good. And frankly, they wouldn't do it in the middle of the season. So, all due respect, that's not happening. I would be very, very, very surprised if there was a Power 4 program out there that just whispered in his ear at the last moment and said, you got to leave because we have $200,000 waiting for you, $300,000. Because if they did that, then I would like to laugh at them. That's just plain and simple. It would not be a good choice. I do not think that's what happened here. Maybe it is, and maybe we'll find that out in time. But as of right now, I have no real reason to believe that another program is in on this in any way. So truly, there's not a lot of things I can say with a ton of confidence right now. The truth in this is very, very shrouded. There's so many different stories, a lot of he said, going back and forth. It's craziness. But here's what I can say without any hesitation in my voice, without anything behind this by any means. The NCAA failed this kid, they failed UNLV, they failed the fans, and they failed this sport. They've decided that we're going to live in a world where this can happen, because the reality is this should never happen. There should never be a world where the starting quarterback of a team that has every chance to go to the Group of 5 playoff, or has a chance to be the Group of 5 team in the playoff, that has every chance to make all types of stories throughout the year, that has 2 massive wins over Big 12 teams, that quarterback should never be able to leave that program. And it's not to say, I don't want to say never, because that's a little bit crazy. There are a number of things that could happen that would change my view on that a little bit. It shouldn't happen for this reason. Period. End of story. It should never happen because a quarterback was promised something in verbally that was not put down on paper, that was not fulfilled for him. That should never happen. It never should have happened in the first place, and frankly, it didn't have to happen. That's the thing that makes me so mad, is it did not have to happen. The NCAA could have done this about 10, 15 years ago and started setting up this system, this formula in a very, very concise way. They decided not to, and they decided not to plainly because they're being lazy. There's no other reason. It's because they don't care about these kids. They don't really care about the sport, and they just care about turning that almighty dollar, just getting as much of that as they possibly can, and if they can do that, then they've done their job. That's the problem with this sport. It's not the kids. It's not, the teams taking advantage of them, although I think that does happen. It's the system that allows all of this to happen all at the same time. I don't know how we've gotten to this point that we're allowing one of the best sports in the entire world, one of the best sports, and one sport that has more money flowing around it than you could possibly imagine, guys. It is absolutely insane what they could do and what they haven't done. And I understand people mad at Matthew Sluka. I totally get it. I totally understand where all of that sentiment is coming from. All of that, take all of that energy, all that hate that you have for Matthew Sluka, or all that hate you have for UNLV, direct it straight towards the NCAA offices, because those are the people that have failed you time and time again as a fan of this sport. Those are the people that have let this fester under the surface for 20, 25 years, and now we get to a point where a kid is leaving his team halfway through the year because they can't get anything in writing. It is absolutely insane. It should never happen, and frankly, it's going to happen more often. I was listening to the Cover 3 pod yesterday, and Bud Elliott said, this is happening under the surface, and it's going to, or could affect the college football playoff race. This can't be the case in college football. We can't be halfway through a season that is supposed to be special, that's supposed to be incredible, that's supposed to have an incredible postseason and do all of these incredible things for so many different teams around the country, and then be talking about this 3 weeks into the season. That cannot happen. That cannot be the way that we go about our sport going forward. And if it is, then it's going to burn. Plain and simple. You're going to lose fans left and right. You're going to have players and teams and the entire system be taken advantage of, and then you're going to watch this entire sport that is incredible, that has every ability to be one of the greatest sports on planet Earth, and frankly already is, even with all of this craziness. You're going to see it slowly deteriorate. You're going to see it slowly go away, and then you're going to see a lot of kids come for their money. And then the NCAA is going to have to pay. And frankly, we're going to have to pay in a number of different ways through TV deals, through media, everything is going to come back to us. I can promise you that. That is the way the sport works. That's the way the people that run the sport work. So be mad at whoever you want. You're more than welcome to be mad at Matthew Sluka. You're more than welcome to be mad at UNLV. I'm a little bit mad at UNLV. I'll be totally honest with you. I think there's going to be negative recruiting around this, and there probably should be. Whoever it was, I don't really care who it was that said it was going to be $100,000 and then it wasn't. I just think that should matter. Maybe, I understand it necessarily doesn't. When you come down to actually pay the bills and you actually have to give them that money, a lot of things change. I totally understand that. I think if you tell a kid something to get him to commit to your school, or at least as a reason to commit to your school, you should come through with that. Period. End of story. So this is going to be negative recruiting against Barry Odom. It's going to be against Brennan Marion because he was the primary recruiter here. I'm not sure that he was the person that said this by any means, but he is going to get a big-time job, and you better believe that there's going to be coaches talking about this with other recruits. So where do they go from here is the big time question, because I think one of the things that everyone kind of came into was when this news came out, it was he's quitting on his team, he's leaving everyone behind, he's doing a horrifying thing, he's a terrible person. He's not. I totally understand where he's coming from. If he was promised a certain amount of money and he is not getting that a certain amount of money, I would not play either, plain and simple. And the people saying it's all about the NFL money, this kid is not going to the NFL. NIL money is life-changing money. We can act like it's not all we want. It is life-changing money. I am a 23-year-old kid. He is a 23-year-old kid. $100,000 is life-changing money. Period. End of story. So if I'm not getting that money, I'm walking out the door all the same. And frankly, it's kind of like the Jaden Rashada situation. I'm kind of happy he did it. Because at some point, someone needs to say something. At some point, a kid needs to stand up and say, this entire system that we are trying to navigate as 18-year-old kids is broken every which way from Sunday. And there's a number of different ways to talk about this, because we can talk about his agent that was not registered in the state and frankly seemed like he didn't really know what was going on. So you got to find new representation, kid. You just have to. I don't know where you go forward, but the reality is wherever you go forward, find a new agency to work with in your future in sports, whatever that looks like, because this is not a group you should be with. All due respect to Equity Sports, all due respect to Marcus Cromartie, they did not do well with this kid. They gave him bad advice pretty much every which way from Tuesday. There were reports that he might have had better offers on the table. If that was the case, and you take the offer that's written, plain and simple, even I know that. So there's a number of things here. The reality is, get rid of the agent and then move forward. Also, Michael Allen left the program yesterday. That has to do with playing time. It is upsetting that he's leaving 3 games into the season. I don't love that by any means, I'll be honest with you. But the reality is that has nothing to do with NIL. It doesn't sound like UNLV has an NIL problem. It just sounds like there was a miscommunication here. That's really the end-all be-all here. More than anything else, blame the NCAA. They're doing exactly what they've been doing for the last 25 years. They're leaving these kids behind. They're deciding that the sport is less important than their money, and that's the end-all be-all. So you want to be mad at Matthew Sluka, you're more than welcome to. You want to say that he quit on his teammates, I don't love that. He's a 23-year-old kid. $100,000 is life-changing money, and if you're not getting paid, then I would walk out the door as well. You can say all you want about his teammates and how he's quitting on them, and I don't love that this is happening. I'm not saying that by any means. What I am saying is if I was in his shoes, I'd make the same exact decision, and a lot of people that are calling him a quitter right now would as well. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Also, getting to the football side of this, because believe it or not, they have a football game this Saturday, and they are still a team that very much is looking at the CFP as a real opportunity. We will talk about the Matthew Sluka stuff. We will get into all of it. More than anything else, I'll leave it at this for the time being. The NCAA is your problem. It's not Matthew Sluka. It's not UNLV, because it is happening all over the country. It's the NCAA that set up this system where all of this can happen in the middle of a season. That's it. That's the end-all be-all. If you want to be mad, yell at those people, and then we'll figure all the rest of it out later. But getting into the football side of this, they play Fresno State on Saturday, and it's a huge game. They absolutely have to win that game, and there's a number of different things going into it, but who's going to be the starting quarterback is going to be Hajj Malik Williams, and I will tell you this. This team does not change with him as quarterback. At least the ability of what they can do, how they're going to go about it, is going to change quite a bit. He is a better passer than what Matthew Sluka is. I hope he is with 43% completion. I very much hope the next guy is a better passer. But he is a better passer than he is, they're going to pass the ball more. That is going to be one of the big changes you see with UNLV. And guess what? It sounds like his teammates are very, very happy about that reality, especially that guy. Ricky White is the best player on this team, and he has not been a factor this year. They are 3-0 without Ricky White, and frankly, they're 3-0 not because of Matthew Sluka. Just plain and simple, I think Matthew Sluka is a very good player. They could be 3-0 if Hajj Malik Williams started those last 3 games. Just telling you plain and simple. Also, the players love it. If you saw Twitter yesterday, if you watch any of the people come out, including Ricky White and a number of other captains on this team, they love it. They're very excited to have him as their quarterback, and they're ready to move forward without Matthew Sluka on this team. And frankly, the funny part about all of this, if he was important to what I don't want to say that. He is very important to what UNLV do. If he was the reason that UNLV was 3-0, if he was carrying them on his back and doing everything for that team, that money would have been in his pocket yesterday. I promise you that. He would have gotten more than $100,000 because it's not like UNLV can't give him that money. They're just not going to because they know the guy behind them can absolutely win them football games and get them exactly where they want to go. So overall, in summation, this is a joke. The fact that we're talking about Matthew Sluka and UNLV in any other context other than what they can do this season and what they can do in possibly the playoff is absolutely ridiculous. And it's not Matthew Sluka's fault. It's not UNLV's fault, although I know there's plenty of blame to go around in both of those areas. It's not either of their faults. It's the NCAA that set up a system where in the middle of a season, we can watch a kid walk out of a very talented team, and now we're talking about NIL. Now we're talking about kids opting out. Now we're talking about all this stuff that has nothing to do with football. So I'm going to take my first break here, and I'm going to get back with one of the best games of the season, one of the best games of the week. We're going to talk about Georgia and Alabama. We're going to get past all of this. I promise you we will cover everything that you need to know around this. But as of right now, I'm a little sick hearing about it. I'll be totally honest with you. So let's talk about Georgia and Alabama right after this break. So stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Matthew Sluka situation. Went a little bit long there, apologies, got a little bit worked up, to be totally honest with you. This is a very frustrating situation that just shouldn't be happening, but it's happening. So we'll figure it out, we'll figure out what's going on. It does not change who UNLV is in my mind on the football field, so that's the big important part here. Let's get into Georgia at Bama, because this one is awesome. I could not be more excited for this game. This is one that I grew up in the Atlanta area. I fully understand what this game means to a lot of people around here, and it's going to be incredible to watch it unfold, because you're in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You're at night. You have Kirby Smart against Kalen DeBoer, two of the best head coaches in the entire country, and they have two different sides of the ball. Kirby's a defensive guy. Kalen DeBoer's an offensive guy. It's going to be incredible to watch this one unfold. I think this is one of those that throw out the playoff. No one cares about the playoff on Saturday. I promise you, when those guys suit up on Saturday, they're the furthest thing from their mind is what the playoff implications of it are. They want to beat that guy in front of them. They want to beat that script A. They want to beat that block G. That's the end goal of Saturday. They do not care where it lands them in the CFP race because, frankly, if you win it, you're not going to have to worry about the CFP race. That's just the reality of this game. It is huge, and Kirby Smart has not done well against them. He is 1-5 against Bama throughout his time at UGA with that one big-time win in the title in 2021, obviously. And now they're trying to take the keys. They're trying to fully take the keys of the SEC, show that they are the cream of the crop. They are the ones that the SEC is going to go through, because Bama beat them last year. And frankly, right now, Bama is at the top of the mountaintop, and Bama's trying to stay there. They're trying to prove that it's not Nick Saban, it's just Bama. You can't necessarily work your way around what Bama's going to be going forward, regardless of Nick Saban or Kalen DeBoer is on the sideline. But players to watch. I think I want to start with Oscar Delp, because I'll talk about this here in a second, but UGA is probably going to need a little bit of extra blocking in this game. And also, they're going to need a guy that's just a very consistent target over that middle of the field, because the reality with this Alabama defense, they are going to be aggressive. That's the way that they play defense. That's the way Kane Womack calls defenses. He is going to attack you. He's going to rush you. Getting a tight end out in space over the middle of the field can be a little bit easier when that happens. And frankly, it can kind of mitigate a lot of that happening. So that's a huge thing in this game. Get Oscar Delp over the middle. Get Ben Urasek over the middle. Maybe Lawson Lucky a little bit. Get these guys involved, because then these linebackers that are so dangerous, and Jahad Campbell and Deontay Lawson, are going to have to stay home more often. They're not going to be able to rush the passer. Jahad Campbell's not going to be able to be just an absolute game breaker that he has been, a bit more at bay, because you're attacking them all over the middle of the field with these tight ends. So I do think Oscar Delp's huge, not only in the blocking game, but also in the pass catching game. And then you got C.J. Allen. Frankly, I think C.J. Allen has to play his best football that he has ever played in his life on Saturday. He has so much on his table on Saturday, and obviously the depth in that linebacker room is nowhere near a problem. So they'll be more than fine rotating guys in there. He is the guy that needs to make a big-time effect, whether that's rushing the passer, which he hasn't been used too much to do, but absolutely can. And then you're going to have to chase down Jalen Milroe a couple of times. You're going to have to make those big-time plays where Jalen Milroe, if he breaks a 20, 30-yard run, that could be the difference in the game. If C.J. Allen can tackle him for a 5-yard gain, that totally changes it the other direction. So a huge player, and frankly, I think he might just be able to have his big-time moment in the sun on Saturday if he can execute the way that UGA probably needs him to in this game. Then I want to talk about Jeremy Bernard. There's so much talk about Ryan Williams. There's so much talk about Kendrick Law, and all of these guys are ridiculously talented. I expect Ryan Williams to have a good effect on this game, no doubt about it. Not many of them have played more football than what Jeremy Bernard has played in. And frankly, Jeremy Bernard played in the national title game. He is not going to be fazed a lot by this atmosphere. That is not the person that he is. That is not the way that he plays football. They need a guy that's going to be that way. I understand Ryan Williams is a fantastic player. This is going to be intimidating. There's no two ways about that. I don't care how you're wired. I don't care who you are. This is going to be a little bit intimidating for him. Letting him settle in by getting the ball to Jeremy Bernard can be hugely important, and then you can get those guys involved as much as you want down the stretch. And then you got Keon Saab. I think when you talk about this back end, kind of the same thing with the wide receivers, a lot of talented kids. A lot of really young kids as well. And Keon Saab is new to the program over there at Alabama, but he's also very veteran. He knows exactly where he needs to be. He's playing really, really good football right now. And frankly, UGA is going to try to throw the ball over the middle of the field. If he can pick one away, that might just be the end of the game. That might just be all that Alabama needs to get this thing rolling and then get those fans involved, and then you're really fighting a bear. It's going to be an absolute nightmare for Georgia if they allow this back end to tear them to pieces, which I don't necessarily expect to happen, but if Keon Saab can have a huge game, then we'll see what happens there. Let's get into how Georgia can win this one, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but give Beck an extra blocker. I think when we talk about Carson Beck, there's so much talk about how good he is dissecting zone coverage and kind of going through his reads and just being a very professional quarterback more than anything else. They're without Tate Ratledge in this game, and that means there's going to be a lot of attacking from Alabama. That's the way they go about business already, and now that they know that you're a little bit vulnerable on that offensive line, they will absolutely be attacking him. You got to give him a little bit more time. You got to make sure that he can dissect this defense just a little bit, because frankly, if you just give Carson Beck on an island between that Bama secondary, I think you would tear him to pieces. I'll be totally honest. I just think there are a number of holes in that defense that have not been exposed yet. So you're probably going to need 6 guys. I don't think 5 is really going to do it, at least for the majority of the snaps on Saturday. You're going to have to make sure that you have at least one extra guy, whether it's a running back or a tight end, in that field to make sure that they chip that one guy, to make sure that they give Carson Beck that 1/2 second more that can absolutely make a difference in this game. And then let the talk fuel you. Earlier this offseason, Jalen Milroe said UGA, I don't think he used the word quit, but he essentially meant quit. He said they were defeated on the sidelines. He said they didn't have, energy about them. He said he knew he had them. use all of that. They all heard it. Kirby Smart absolutely heard, and I bet you it's blasting over the speakers right now in Sanford Stadium and all of the places that they're working out in. Use every bit of energy you have. Use all the stuff you have at your disposal in this game because you're going to need all of it. This is not a game where you're just going to out scheme them, where you're just going to outplay them, where you're just going to out execute them. You need a little bit of grit to you. You need a little bit of something that's going to put you over that edge, and this might just be it. Maybe Jalen Milroe handed them something they very much need, or maybe there's a whole lot of nothing, and Jalen Milroe was right. So take your pick, Jory. You got to figure out how you want to take that. And then keep these defensive tackles fresh. This is a very good interior offensive line, and we'll talk about it here in a second for Alabama. And it was a huge issue in the Kentucky game just not getting these defensive tackles off the field enough, and a lot of that just has to do with where they sit right now. Ingram Dawkins has 63 snaps, Christian Miller 58, Nazir Sackhouse 52. The next closest guy is at 17 with Gabe Harris. They have to get more people involved, and it sounds like they're getting a little bit more healthy there, but right now you're not winning with that type of disparity in snaps. You're just not against Alabama, so definitely something they're going to have to figure out, and frankly, Alabama's going to attack you downhill. Run downhill is my biggest key to the game for Alabama because this is who you are. It's not about changing who you are right now. It's not about being anything different. It's about running. It's about doing exactly what you've been built to do pretty much from the get-go, and that's having Tyler Booker inside, getting Parker Brailsford over from Washington, having Jaden Roberts on the other side, a ridiculous trio that you have on the interior, and you're going up against defensive tackles like we just talked about that might just be a little bit gassed at some point in this game. Run downhill. Use Justice Hill. Use Jamarian Miller. Do everything you can to just wear out this UGA defense because you might just need a couple of plays in this one. If the Kentucky performance was telling us anything, you might just need a couple of plays to beat this UGA team, and then get this crowd involved. I think this is an obvious one, but at the end of the day, the crowd knows how big this one is. They're not confused about what it means for Georgia to come into their stadium. They're not confused about how much it means this in particular time because of how much Nick Saban kind of dominated them and how Georgia wants to flip the script. That does not need to be explained to these people. I can promise you that. You need every bit of them. You need all of the juice you can get, like we were talking about with Georgia. Anything that you can get in this game, any extra little oomph that you can get on 3rd down and 10 with 4 minutes left to go, anything. And sometimes that is just the crowd getting a little bit more involved, the crowd getting that little bit louder and getting that linebacker to run that little bit faster. It's really those margins that are going to decide this game, and this crowd could be really the X factor in it. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, a crowd being that big of an X factor, but when the margins are this thin, it's exactly what it is. And then dominate the interior. You have Tyler Booker. That's the plain and simple truth of this game. Tyler Booker is one of the most fun offensive linemen to watch in the entire country. He's incredible. He's going to be awesome at the next level, I think, and he's one of those guys that can just totally take over a game, even at the guard position. I know that sounds crazy. He truly is that incredible. Watch number 52 on Saturday. But if he can win that battle, Parker Brailsford, and Jaden Roberts, if they can win that battle outright, there's no question about what's going on. They're probably going to win this game, plain and simple. And also, on the other side, you have an interior offensive line for UGA that's missing Tate Ratledge. If your defensive tackles can get after him, LT Overton and all of these guys can get after him a little bit, then you're having a real conversation. So it's one of those things that whenever you play an SEC matchup, you're always going to have to dominate the trenches. That's the way you're going to win games. That's the way you have to go about business. For the interior in this game, it might be more important than any other game in the SEC all year. So definitely will be something to watch. And frankly, this pick is an absolute nightmare, guys. I'll be totally honest with you. But I'm going to go with my gut. I've gone back and forth a couple of different times on this game. I've said Alabama's going to win multiple times. I said Georgia's going to win multiple times. I said Georgia was going to win first, and I'll roll with that for the time being. It's going to be an incredible game down there in Tuscaloosa, but I think they get it done for Georgia. I think there's just enough juice in that building right now and enough urgency after that Kentucky game that I think they're going to come ready. I think they're going to get a big-time win in Tuscaloosa and continue this thing rolling and likely be the favorite to win another national title after this game. So definitely one that's going to be tough. There's no two ways about that. Would not be surprised at all if it went the other direction. I would be surprised if it was a blowout any other way. So I'll just be totally honest. This one is going to be close. It's going to be incredible and cannot wait for this game. It is one of those that you've been circling really since January, and now you finally get it. So cannot wait for this one to be played. And I do have Georgia winning. Man, I could not be it could not be more of a toss-up in my mind. It's going to be incredible and just cannot wait for this one to get going. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Illinois at Penn State, another ranked matchup that is a little bit more under the radar, a bigger line, but at the end of the day, still a really huge one, and one that Illinois could change the entire narrative around that team in this game. So we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Georgia-Alabama game over there in Tuscaloosa. I do have Georgia winning that one. Could not feel like more of a toss-up in my mind, so I don't think I'd feel any better if I was picking Alabama. So it's going to be an incredible one down there in Tuscaloosa, but we also have an incredible one happening up there in State College. Penn State is facing off against Illinois on Saturday, and this one is really interesting because you see that line and you think, okay, Penn State's likely going to be able to win this one, keep on going about their day, and that's going to be the end of the story. I think a lot of people thought that when Nebraska faced off against Illinois last week. So I'd be a little bit careful. Penn State's a better team than Nebraska. I'll be very, very clear when I say that. But just to be fair, this is not a team that you're going to get to quit by any means. This is not a team that is going to hand you a lot of stuff. Illinois is going to come ready, and they are going to come with a lot of energy. I can promise you that. Penn State's looked good thus far, no question about that. Bowling Green did expose a little bit of gap in that defense that we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's a number of different things that could happen in this game. Frankly, if Luke Altmaier is as good as he was against Nebraska, this one might just get interesting in a hurry. And then for Penn State, it's just about proving everyone right, showing that the first 3 weeks were not an anomaly, they're not anything different. They are exactly who we saw the first couple of weeks. They are a dominating team that's really explosive on offense and can really hurt you on defense. So let's get into some players to watch. Caden Fagan is huge in this game. He's the running back for Illinois, a really good player, really talented, and one of those guys that you talk about this Illinois team, and there's a lot of energy around Luke Altmaier and Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, and there should be. They're very, very talented players. The reality is you're probably not going to go punch for punch with Penn State in this game. It's not to say that they can't necessarily, but there's a number of things that probably would have to go their way if they're just going to outright go punch for punch with them. So use your running game. Slow this game down just a little bit. I don't think you necessarily go away from who you are, but definitely make sure that you get this running game going, that you get confident, and then maybe some of those holes that we saw against Bowling Green are a little bit more wide open against you. And then you got Matthew Bailey on the back end of this defense. Penn State's going to throw the ball. We know that about them. We also know they're going to throw the ball over the middle of the field. That's who they are. They throw a lot of crossers, a lot of posts, and that's what Drew Aller's really, really good at. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But this is one of those things where you got to make sure that you have a cap on this team. When you have a crowd like that and you have an atmosphere and you have all of this stuff heading in Penn State's direction, not letting them get that big play could be all the difference. Not letting them get that one thing over the middle of the field that totally changes this game, gets the crowd into it, kind of buries your confidence in a number of ways, is absolutely huge. So that back end with Matthew Bailey in it is going to be massive in this game. And then you got Amari Evans. I think when you talk about Penn State, coming into that first game, we were all trying to figure out who the wide receiver is. Who's the guy that Drew Aller is going to go to? Who's his go-to guy? It was Trey Harrison, and it became very, very clear very quickly. And it was a little bit of a mystery going into that game, probably for West Virginia a little bit as well. No longer a mystery. Everyone knows who Trey Harrison is. Everyone knows that if number 6 is on the field, you got to be careful. Now, number 5 might be able to hurt you as well. I think Amari Evans is a very, very talented player, and I think in this game especially, with a very solid defense, not necessarily elite by any means, but at least solid, they're going to key in on Trey Harris. They're going to make Harrison. They're going to make sure that he does not beat them. you got to open things up for Amari Evans. You got to make sure that he gets a couple of touches in this game and just kind of confuse this defense just enough to give you some openings. And then you got DeJuan Lane. He just got asked to do a lot more because KJ Winston is going to be out for this game, is likely going to be out for the year. So absolutely hate to see that. Very, very talented player. And this is still a very good unit, but it means DeJuan Lane is going to have to be a huge player for this team. He's going to take way, way more snaps than he did before, and he's going to be one of those guys that if they make a mistake on that back end, you might just notice it was number one. So you got to make sure that he's not the guy that's making mistakes, and he's giving you at least a good chance to win this game. I think he's a plenty talented player and will be more than fine, but there's a number of things that he's going to be asked to do on Saturday that he just hasn't quite been asked to do this year. But all the things that Illinois can do to win this game, like we just talked about, force that issue on the back end. Without Kevin Winston Jr., I'll use his full legal name, without him back there, this unit's going to be different. Still a very talented unit, but relatively unproven. There are a number of players back there, A.J. Harris, and a lot of guys that are really good players. I have absolutely every ability to be elite players at this level. As of right now, there's a lot of question marks around it. So force that issue. Keep throwing at them. Find that little opening that you need, and then get Pat Bryant loose. Get Zachariah Franklin loose, and then this game can change in a hurry. And then also play your game. We talked about what Caden Fagan is going to mean for this team, and he's absolutely huge. There's a number of these games where Illinois will go face Penn State, or maybe, Kentucky will face Georgia at Georgia, or Tennessee will face Georgia at Georgia a couple of years ago. Not now, obviously, but sometimes this will happen where a team will go to another stadium and then they'll just force things. They'll throw the ball downfield. They'll try to make that big play. They'll try to take the crowd out of it. And then you look up at the end of the first quarter and it's 21-0. And you're trying to figure out how it happened. It just happened because you weren't playing your football. Illinois just needs to play their game. It might not be a guarantee that you're going to beat Penn State with your game. I understand that. But going out of who you are, trying to find that one big play, trying to push the ball downfield more than you're comfortable is going to get you in a world of hurt. That's just going to happen. So do what you've been doing. Be a really balanced attack. Be really confident in what you do. Stay in front of the chains. And then let Luke Altmaier pick his moments. That's what they do really well. And frankly, I think if they get anywhere away from that, then it's going to be a really long day for them. And then finally, rattle Aller early. A very, very interesting thing in this game because Drew Aller has been awesome through the season. He's looked very confident, very crisp. He's been the quarterback that Penn State fans have been waiting for. But the question becomes, what happens if you get him early? What happens if he makes one mistake? He throws one pick, or you hit him a couple of times early in this game and he starts thinking just a little bit more. Then maybe those mistakes come back. Maybe he's not the fully reformed project that we all thought he was. Maybe there's a couple of things that he could open the door for you for if you can get after him. So this pass rush is going to be huge. Gabe Jacobs, a number of other guys on that team are going to be massive in this game, and if they can perform, then maybe you get a couple of mistakes that we just haven't seen from Drew Aller yet. But the other side of this, how Penn State can win, kind of like playing your own game, don't handcuff Drew Aller. It's kind of the same principle that when you go into these big-time games where so much can be proven for a young kid, sometimes you just throttle it back just a little bit. You'll get that run game a little bit more involved, and Penn State can do that. It's not to say that they can't. It's just to say what he does is throw the ball downfield. What he does well, maybe better than just about anyone in the country, is throw the ball downfield. 10-plus yards downfield, 12 for 19, 380 yards, 6 touchdowns, and no picks this season. That is what you need to do. That is his comfort zone, and you should not get away from that in the slightest. I understand he's a young kid. I understand what I just talked about. If he gets rattled, maybe some of those mistakes come up. That can't make you shy away from who he is. And he's a very talented kid, and he could turn all types of heads. He could turn a lot of NFL scouts' heads on Saturday, but that'll come in time, obviously. But definitely a huge thing. Let him be himself. Let him do him, and also just unleash the ball a couple of times. He's very talented, and you should not want to shy away from using him in this game. Also, get that whiteout atmosphere. Brett Bielema, was talking about Penn State going up to this game and said they have that whiteout atmosphere, whatever that means. Show him what that means. That's the job of the fans on Saturday. Show him exactly what that means. Show him he did not want to say that. And show him exactly why that is a special atmosphere. That's the goal of Saturday for Penn State fans. More than anything else is just prove Brett Bielema, I suppose, right in saying have a whiteout atmosphere. Prove that this is what it looks like. Prove that he did not want to give you any ammo. And I understand that this was referencing something that James Franklin said. I'm just saying, use all the juice. He also said Nebraska's a tougher place to play. Everyone heard him. Come out swinging. Let them rethink those words. That's the end goal for these fans this Saturday, and frankly, if they can get that, then Penn State might be off running in this game. Also, make Illinois a passing offense. I know this is kind of an interesting take because Luke Altmaier has been so incredible this season. He's been absolutely awesome. He's gone over 200 yards, around 20 completions in pretty much every game this season. The thing is, that's all well and good. He's been absolutely incredible. He's been executing this offense at a very high level. There are a number of things that could go wrong if he's the guy that has to make every single play. Kansas was able to slow that rushing attack down, and if Jalen Daniels didn't give the ball away 4 times, they would have won that game, plain and simple. So that's the difference. Stop the run, and things could get a little bit ugly. I think Luke Altmaier is plenty capable of executing this offense at a very high level. I don't know if he can do it if they can't get that run game going. I think there's a number of things that could happen on that back end that could just kind of get him into a weird spot. So it's not that Luke Altmaier is not capable of making this a pass-first offense, but I just think it would go against what Illinois wants to do and definitely take him a little bit out of that rhythm, and that's probably all you need if you're Penn State. So finally, a pick in this game. I think the line's a little bit too high. I think Illinois is an interesting team. I think they might come out of the gates a little bit faster than Penn State will in this game. But I can't pick Illinois in this one. I think Penn State just got too many guys on that field. I think Drew Aller's going to have something of a coming out party. Might not be the prettiest performance in the world, but definitely will show us he's a very different player than he was a year ago. And I do think Penn State gets this win. I think it's going to be a fun game for about 2.5 quarters, and then Penn State will find a way to pull away, and that'll be that. So it's going to be an incredible game. Cannot wait to see what Illinois has in them on this incredible run that they've been on. But I do have Penn State winning that game. It'll be awesome to watch that one unfold. But let's take our third break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about 4 other games. We'll get to Ole Miss, Kentucky, Wisconsin, USC. We'll get to Oklahoma, Auburn, which is a very interesting one down there in Auburn. And then we'll get to Washington State, Boise State, which is a very important game when you talk about the playoff down the road. So we'll take our break here and we'll be right back with that. So stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Penn State-Illinois game, going to be a really, really fun one up there in State College, and I do have Penn State winning it. It's going to be really fun. I think that line is a little bit too aggressive. I have them winning it by 10, so not nearly that 18.5 number, but going to be a really fun one in State College, and maybe Illinois can shock the world. Who knows? But we have a couple other games I want to talk about with you guys here, and we'll roll through these a little bit quickly just so we can get through all 4. But let's start with Kentucky going to Oxford to play Ole Miss. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how this one plays out because it's going to be a lot of confirming things. It's going to be a lot of figuring out how real Ole Miss is, how bad Kentucky is in some respects, and just figuring out where Ole Miss is on their quest to a national title because they haven't necessarily been tested yet. This will be the first time that there's another defense on the side of the field that is downright terrifying, and we'll figure out how they handle it because there are a number of different things that went wrong in that Georgia game for Kentucky that they missed their shot, and I think they're coming back with a little bit more energy into this one, knowing that they might be able to get a little bit of that energy back in that program. But a couple of the keys to the game, I think time of possession is huge in this one. Kentucky is 22nd in the country, and Ole Miss is 108th. They play 2 very different styles of football. You got to make sure that you kind of flip it just a little bit if you're Ole Miss. Not necessarily aggressively, but if you can absolutely get a little bit more time possession. And then if you're Kentucky, try to lean it as much in your favor as you possibly can. Keep this Ole Miss offense off the field, and we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, it's going to be one of those things that maybe you have a little bit more of aggressive of an example here. Maybe Kentucky gets up to 35 minutes a game, and Ole Miss is down at 25. And that's all the difference they need. Who knows? It's going to be one of those things that's going to be really interesting to watch, but I pretty much know for a fact that Kentucky's going to try to slow this one down. And then you got the Kentucky D-line against the Ole Miss O-line. This is really the equalizer for Kentucky. This is the thing that they're able to kind of throw out there and say, if we dominate you in this very specific facet, we're going to have a chance to win the game. That's kind of what happened against UGA, and it could very well happen in this one. This O-line for Ole Miss is good, not great. I think they're a solid unit. I don't think they're at the point where they need to be going throughout the rest of the season, and this is a really good defensive line with Deone Walker and Trayon Ribinka and all of these remarkable players. You have to make sure you keep them in front of you. You have to make sure you win that battle if you're Ole Miss. And if you're Kentucky and you can win it, then things could get interesting in a hurry, and maybe you get that one mistake that you need from Jackson Dart. And then you got Ole Miss's pass rush, Kentucky absolutely dominated, or South Carolina absolutely dominated Kentucky's offensive line when it comes to pass rush. Ole Miss averages just a half sack less than South Carolina on the season with 3 sacks per game. They're going to get after you. Princely Umanmielen is an absolute beast. They also have Sunshireen Perkins, They have a number of players that are going to be a problem if Kentucky cannot get that under wraps. And frankly, I just don't think they're going to be able to. I think Ole Miss is going to be able to win this game. I do think there's going to be a little bit of a moment where people look up and see a 7-point game, a 6-point game, something like that, and then Ole Miss will slowly pull away. I don't think it's going to be anything crazy from Ole Miss, but I think Ole Miss gets the win, shows who they are, and kind of proves to everyone that the first 3 weeks, although they were against inferior opponents, were exactly who this team is. And then we got Wisconsin-USC. This is a really interesting game for a number of different reasons, and obviously one being because USC is coming off a really tough loss, and that's one of the big-time keys to this game. And then you got Wisconsin kind of in the Kentucky position. They feel like they might be able to do what Michigan did and just kind of run the ball. Just kind of run the ball as aggressively as you possibly can in this game and see if you come out on the right side. And that kind of brings me to the keys of the game. USC's mentality will be really interesting because you are coming off a really tough loss where you got battered and bruised, and it was definitely not the way you wanted to finish that game. What's the energy like on this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball? How are they attacking this game? Frankly, I have less worries about this team being able to respond the way that I expect them to, but there's definitely a little bit out there that can definitely give you a little bit of pause if you're a USC fan, so it'll be fascinating to see how they kind of bounce back from that really tough loss a week ago and prove themselves this upcoming week. And then Wisconsin's approach, we just talked about it. It's going to be a lot like what Michigan did. Now, I don't think they're necessarily capable of running at the same clip that Michigan was, but they're going to run the ball. They're going to try to make USC quit in certain respects and see if they can just come out on the right side of things. This is really the way Wisconsin's likely going to have to go about business probably the rest of the schedule, if we're being totally honest. They're going to have to run the ball and then just let the chips fall where they may. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this unfold. I think it's one of those things that if Wisconsin ever had an equalizer, it hypothetically would be running the ball and playing O-line. I don't know if they have that in this game, but maybe they do. And then on the other side, USC's speed. That's going to be an absolute nightmare for pretty much every team they play, but especially a Wisconsin team that doesn't necessarily have the prerequisite athleticism on the back end that a lot of these other teams have. They have plenty of dudes, don't get me wrong, but when you face Zachariah Branch and you face all of these other guys, it becomes a lot harder in a hurry. So I do think USC is going to be able to utilize that. Wisconsin's going to want to play a rock fight. That's the way that they're going to be able to win this game. USC being able to get them out on the edge and kind of create space is probably the way that they're going to go about business. And frankly, I think they're going to be really successful doing that. I don't think Wisconsin has a lot of juice right now. I don't think that run game is really going to be able to get going the way that it really needs to if they're going to be able to win this game. So I am picking USC to bounce back in a big way and kind of show everyone that although that game did not go their way, there are a number of things ahead for this team, and they're getting right back to work, getting focused and making sure that they have everything in front of them. Then you got a really interesting game down there in Auburn, Alabama, because these are two teams that are under weird circumstances right now. Oklahoma just benched their quarterback, Jackson Arnold, for Michael Hawkins. Auburn just had a very weird press week from Hugh Freeze, and I'll just leave it at that for the time being, but it's going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold, not even from a game planning perspective, although that's very interesting as well, just from an energy perspective. How do these two teams look? And that's my first key to the game. Confidence in the locker room. Who is that team that's walking out of that locker room arm in arm and feel very confident in one another? That might just decide this game. I know that sounds a little bit crazy before they even get on the field, but it might just be a mentality thing in this game. Who has taken the last week and all the craziness around their program, all of the people talking not so well about their program, including myself. How do they handle all of that stuff? How do they deal with it? And can they walk out of that locker room and say, we're leaving all of that behind, we're just playing the football in front of us? Whoever can do that is likely going to be the one that gets the win. And then you got to make Michael Hawkins comfortable. If you're Oklahoma and you're Seth Luttrell and you're trying to get into this game, he's going into Jordan-Hare Stadium. He's going into one of the scariest places to play in the entire country for his very first start as a true freshman. If he's not comfortable in this game, it is going to be a long day, and you're going to make Auburn look a lot better than they are. So you got to make sure you get this guy comfortable, whether that's running the ball or passing. Whatever that looks like for him, make sure that he's in a good position to succeed, and that brings me to the offensive game plan. Seth Luttrell, Hugh Freeze, and all of these offensive game plans have to be really good. You know Oklahoma's defense is going to be an absolute nightmare. For Oklahoma, they just have to make sure that offensive line is not a big factor in this game, and frankly, not a big factor for pretty much the rest of the season. They're going to have to avoid them as much as they possibly can, move the pocket, use quarterback draws, whatever you can to keep this D-line at bay and keep this O-line at least feeling good about themselves. That's the end goal with Oklahoma right now, and I think they're going to be able to do it. I just think this one's going to be gross. I'll be totally honest with you guys. I think it's going to be an absolute rock fight. I don't think there's going to be points until about halftime, if I'm being totally honest. And I think they'll get it done. I think Oklahoma's going to get the win, but I think both these programs walk out of this one just a little bit upset with how this one went down. So definitely will be interesting to watch. I do have Oklahoma winning by a hair down there in Jordan-Hare Stadium, but would not be surprised if it went the other direction. These are just two teams that are really hard to get a beat on right now. But let's get into the last game here, and we had to give this game some love. This game is so important, and frankly, I know this sounds crazy. It might be the most important when you talk about the playoff. Now, I don't care too much about what's going to happen in the playoff right about now, but if you're one of those people that really cares about what it means for the playoff, this might be the most important game of the weekend because both these teams are looking at it as if they win this one, they are fully on their way to a CFP berth. And let's get into how they're going to be able to do that because this is going to be a really interesting game. The biggest one is run defenses. You have two guys on both sides of the field, and we'll talk about them here in a second, that are downright terrifying. But overall, these rushing offenses are just terrifying in general. Boise State's 4th in the country, 296 yards. Washington State's 17th in the country, 224. They're going to run the ball. That is what they're going to do, and if you can stop the run, you're going to win the game. Plain and simple, that is the end-all, be-all when you play Boise State or when you play Washington State. That's it. So whoever can do that is going to be successful. Boise State has not been good at doing that. Washington State has not necessarily been great at doing that. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of develops, but overall, I think it could be a real reality. Whoever has the more rushing yards in this game is winning this game. Whoever allows less is winning this game. So we'll figure out what happens there. And then you got some dark horse Heisman candidates. Frankly, Ashton Jeanty should not remotely be a dark horse, and he is not in my mind, but he's a running back on Boise State, so that makes him a dark horse according to some of the voting members. But at the end of the day, two really, really fun players. Two guys that are absolutely worth your time every single Saturday, not just when they're playing each other. John Mateer coming off a game that was really great. You know, he put up a ton of yards, did a number of really great things. Also gave the ball away a couple of times. Got to be a little bit more careful with the ball. And then Ashton Jeanty averaging over 10 yards a carry, doing absolutely everything for this Boise State offense. If Washington State cannot get him under wraps, then he might just go for 6 touchdowns against them. He's absolutely ridiculous. He's one of those players that, frankly, the second you watch him on a football field, you realize that's the best running back in the country, and there are a number of guys that are around him. He's a difference maker. He would be on every single roster in the country if they could have him right this second. So love these two players. Cannot wait to see what they can do. And then handling this moment. We talked about it earlier. I think this one is huge for the CFP. I think whoever wins this one is looking at the rest of their schedule and saying, we could go undefeated. We could win our conference in Boise State's case, and I guess in Washington State's case as well. But you could win your conference and then go to the CFP. That is what's on the table after this game because, frankly, I look at the rest of their schedule. They do, I believe Washington State has Fresno State. I believe Boise State as well. So still some difficult games ahead, no doubt about that. But you win this one for either of these teams. I think they look at the rest of their schedule and say, we can probably beat anyone on here. So it's one of those games that, yes, it's week 4 and there's only so much importance around it, but you might just come to Selection Sunday and look up and say, that was the game that decided it. Washington State's 11-1 and Boise State is 13-0, I suppose, and they're in the playoff. Or the flip side, Washington State's 12-0, Boise State's 11-1 or 12-1, 11-2, and that's the difference. So it's going to be a huge game, and I think Boise State's going to get it done. This is one that I'm a little bit worried about. I think Washington State's playing really, really good football right now. I worry about that defense. I think they showed a little something, a little bit of an opening against San Jose State, and I think Boise State's going to be able to exploit it just that little bit more that they need to. So I'm going to go with Boise State in this game. I think it's going to be a really fun one. I cannot wait to watch this one unfold, and it is a late night one, but I'm more than happy to stay up for this one. Cannot wait for that one to unfold, but let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to get into the Hot Take Thursdays. There are a number of different things that I want to talk about as we get closer to this upcoming week that are just going to be interesting throughout this week, and I think one of them has to do with the playoff and one team just falling out of the playoff race a little bit. So we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just touched on a number of different games in the top 25 that are going to be very, very important, including a very fun one against Washington State and Boise State at the end of the night on Saturday. So be on the lookout for all of those. Cannot wait for those one to unfold. But let's get into some hot takes. Let's get into some hot takes about this upcoming weekend. And the first one might not be all that hot, but I do think it's important. I think Carson Beck plants his flag this weekend. I think there's been a number of different moments for Carson Beck throughout his career. I think he remembers that last one in Atlanta against Alabama. I think that one eats him up just a little bit inside. It's his only loss as a starter at UGA, so I would imagine it would. But the reality is, I think he has all the energy he needs from a mental perspective going into this game. I also think he's an elite player. I've made no bones about it. I think he's the best quarterback in the country. I think he proves it on Saturday. I think there's a number of different things that are going to be thrown at him that are not going to be easy by any means. I think he's going to eat him up. I know there's a lot of talk around other people right now. You know, after that Kentucky game, we weren't necessarily talking about Carson Beck too much. It was all about Quinn Ewers. It was all about Cam Ward. It was all about these other people, you know, taking the Heisman or going to a national title or being that number one pick at the end of the day. I think Carson Beck proves everyone wrong. I think he shows that everyone that he is the best player in the country. Or not the best player, that's Travis Hunter. The best quarterback in the country. He is the one that's going to win a national title this year. He is a Heisman frontrunner, and he is the guy that's going to be picked number one overall over there in April. So it doesn't mean he's going to go for 300 yards, 4 scores. Doesn't mean he's going to do anything absolutely insane in this game from a stat perspective. I just think when you watch this game, you're going to see a guy in full control of what he's doing, in full control of this offense, and executing it at a ridiculously high level, even with a great defense on the other side. So I think Carson Beck proves a point on Saturday. I think he shows to everyone that that game over there in Atlanta last year was the anomaly. It wasn't who he is. It wasn't who this Georgia team is going to be going forward. So I'm putting a little bit of hope in that guy. You know, I still think he's the best quarterback in the country, and I'll lean with that. If he gets dominated this weekend, maybe I'll change my tune a little bit, but I'm going to roll with him for the time being. I think Carson Beck makes a big-time point this upcoming weekend. And then I think Illinois does the exact same. I think they prove a point even in a loss. I do have them losing by 10 points to Penn State. I think they're going to be able to be really tough this weekend. And frankly, they were already put in a really tough spot. They're going away from home in a whiteout atmosphere, quote-unquote, against a Penn State team that kind of felt their own mortality against Bowling Green. I think they know what they do poorly. I think they know what they do well. And I think they're going to be laser focused for this game with Illinois coming off a huge win, which obviously helps this as well. So I think you're not going to fly under the radar, I guess is the best way to put it, if you're Illinois. What you're going to be able to do is just match punches for a little bit. I think they're going to play really, really good football, and I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to be able to find Pat Bryant and Zachariah Franklin over the middle of the field, and I think they're going to be able to take advantage of this back end just a little bit for Penn State. So I don't necessarily think Illinois is going to run away with this game by any means. I don't think Illinois is even going to win this game. What I do think is Illinois is going to walk in and not be afraid. I think they're not going to flinch. I think they're going to play their football, and I think they're going to play really good football for the majority of this game. Penn State's just going to make those couple of plays down the stretch on the defensive and offensive side of the ball. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold. I just think if you're Illinois, do what you've done the first part of the season. Avoid mistakes, play clean, do a lot of really great things, stay in front of the chains, chew clock, do all of those things that you've been doing the first 3 weeks. And you'll have every ability to be in this game, first 4 weeks, and you'll have every ability to be in this game. So it'll be really interesting to watch this one unfold. But I think Illinois falls in this one, but I think they prove a point to just about everyone else in the country that they are not a joke. They are not an anomaly that was just able to beat a interesting Nebraska team and now is going to fall off a cliff. They're going to be here to stay, and whenever you face up against them, which Michigan is going to have to do in a couple of weeks, you're going to have to be on your A game because they're going to make you be on your A game. And then you got a Notre Dame team. I think they're going to fall out of the CFP race this upcoming weekend. Frankly, I've been very clear about this. I think they should already be out of the CFP race. I think losing to Northern Illinois at home should disqualify you, but that's none of my business. I understand how the 12-team playoff works, so we'll see what happens. But they do play Louisville this upcoming weekend. I just think it's a bad matchup more than anything else. And I don't necessarily think Notre Dame can't stop them offensively or anything like that. I just think when you're talking about Notre Dame, scoring points is like pulling teeth for that team. There is not a lot of things that they're going to be able to do, especially against a ridiculous defensive line for Louisville. If they're going to try to just straight up run the ball, it's going to be a nightmare for Notre Dame. They went up against a really potent rushing attack against Georgia Tech last week. They gave up 2.6 yards per carry. I think Notre Dame's going to be a little bit better than that, but they still have questions on that offensive line. They're still a very young unit, and we'll see how they can handle this defensive line, but I don't like Notre Dame in this game even a little bit. I'll be totally honest with you. So that Northern Illinois loss obviously put them on thin ice. I think it should have really just had them splash on through. But this week, I think, is going to be the pickaxe to that ice. I think they're going to fall through. I think the CFP race will be done in South Bend, and they'll be looking up in Week 6 and asking a lot of questions about how this all went down. So there's going to be a number of questions to be answered up there in South Bend at the end of the week, and I think it'll come because Louisville is going to get that big-time win. And then you got Ole Miss. I think they're going to be a dogfight in the third quarter. I gave my pick with that one. I have them winning by 13, but I do think they're going to be tested. It's kind of like the same principle I was talking about a couple of weeks ago when we got into the Missouri-Boston College game. This is a team that just hasn't been tested yet. It's not to say that they can't handle that test. It's just to say, what if Kentucky throws the first punch? What if Kentucky gets a big touchdown to Barry and Brown? What if they get a pick six early on in this game and everyone at Ole Miss kind of sitting there being like, this isn't how games are supposed to go. We're supposed to score at will and we're supposed to win by 60. That's the way that it's been going for the first couple of weeks. If Kentucky can possibly just throw that first punch, maybe things get a little bit more interesting. So it's one of those things that I don't know how great Kentucky is. I don't know if they're going to be a dominating team on defense the entire year. I definitely don't think they're going to be competing in the SEC down the road. What I do think they can do is stifle an offense. I think they can slow down a team just enough to make it deep into the third quarter, and you're looking up and Kentucky's down 3. At 2:30 p.m. on Saturday, Kentucky's only down 3 points, and then you look up 5 minutes later, and they're down 17. So it could happen in a hurry, don't get me wrong, but I do think there would be a little bit of worry at that Ole Miss, in that Ole Miss locker room at halftime on Saturday. So going to be a really fun game there. Cannot wait to see what Kentucky can do, but I do think Ole Miss wins. I just think it's a little bit contentious in the first couple of quarters. And then we got a couple of big-time Mountain West matchups. We talked about the Matthew Sluka situation. We're moving on from that. I understand we can talk about that all we want, but they have a really good quarterback behind him in Malik Williams. He is going to be more than fine. This is still a huge game in this season and still might decide who ends up going to be that group of 5 team. And UNLV really needs this one. Mikey Keene was having an incredible season for Fresno State last year, missed the last 3 games, and they missed out on the Mountain West Championship. He knows how much this one means. They were able to beat UNLV last year, but he knows that this one is as important as every other one on the schedule, and he knows he's going to want to stay on that field. He's going to want to capture every single moment he possibly can, and he believes that they should have been in the championship last year, and I can't necessarily argue with them. If Mikey Keene was on that field for the last 3 games, then they probably would have been. So it'll be really interesting to watch this one unfold. Malik Williams is going to be appointment television. I can almost promise you guys that. He's going to be so much fun to watch. That offense is still going to be as explosive as ever. I cannot wait for this one to unfold, and frankly, I think it's just going to be downright incredible to watch this one, regardless of who's at quarterback for UNLV. And then you got another one, and this isn't necessarily a Mountain West matchup, although it should be. That's a different conversation for another day. Washington State against Boise State. We broke this one down earlier. I do have Boise State winning it. This one's huge. When you talk about the college football playoff in the group of 5, and obviously Washington State doesn't factor into it quite as much, but could be an at-large bid at the end of the day. Boise State, with a loss already, they very much need this game. If they're able to win this game, then they're looking forward saying, okay, the Mountain West is what we own for the last little bit, and we'll be able to do it this year and move on to the playoff. That's what their mindset is going to be. If you're Washington State, this is the toughest team on your schedule, pretty much across the board. I think you could include Washington, although if Boise State and Washington played on a neutral field, I think you'd have a very interesting game there. But regardless, this is the toughest team, at least the rest of the way, on your schedule. If you can beat them, you can beat absolutely anyone on your schedule, and then you'll prove a big-time point. Every time that you walk into another stadium with a Mountain West team, they'll be a little bit nervous because they know you beat the big dogs. They know you beat Boise State, and especially if you're able to beat them by a ton, not necessarily saying they have to by any means, but it'll be an interesting game and one of those that I think could totally shake up this conference. And a lot of conferences will be shaken up this weekend. The Mountain West might just be more than any other. So it's going to be really fun to watch those two matchups. They are late night matchups, so we'll have to get a little bit used to that. But it's going to be so much fun to see those unfold. And whoever comes out on the winning side might just set themselves up for a berth in that Mountain West title. And then you got a really fun one down in Baton Rouge. Cannot wait for this game. And although it is South Alabama, although the line is quite a bit high, is very, very high in this game, it's going to be a lot of points, guys. We're going to see so many points in this game. I'm predicting a combined 75 points. I thought going up to 80. I'm a little bit worried about that. But I do think we'll get at least 75 points in this game. South Alabama averaging 35.3 points per game. LSU averaging 30. These are two elite offenses. No two ways about that. Neither defense is quite where they want to be. I think South Alabama played great football against App State last week. I also think App State kind of handed them a little bit on the offensive side of the ball, especially with some of the things they were trying to push down the stretch to get back in that game. So I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. I think South Alabama is going to come out swinging. I think Gio Lopez is going to cause problems for that LSU defense, especially without someone like Harold Perkins in that linebacker room. And then on the other side, I think Garrett Nussmeier is just awesome. I think he's going to tear people to pieces this year, and I think this will be absolutely no different. He'll find Mason Taylor. He'll find all of these athletic wide receivers, and LSU might just take up 55 of the 75 points that I'm talking about, but at the end of the day, I do think we'll get plenty of points in this game. I think LSU will be able to likely win this game, but the over-under is at 65.5, and I absolutely love it. I know that sounds crazy with a number at 65.5, but I do think we're going to get tons of points that weekend. Probably will be one of my best bets tomorrow, but be on the lookout for that. It's going to be so much fun to watch this game, and I think we're going to get tons of points in Baton Rouge on Saturday. Cannot wait for that matchup, and maybe South Alabama can shock the world and make a very, very interesting Saturday for all of us. But it's going to be awesome to watch this week unfold. I know there's a lot of talk around NIL and a lot of talk around the transfer portal and all of this different stuff. There's football on. There's football to be played on Saturday. There's a very, very, very good game to be played on Saturday in Georgia, Alabama. I do have Georgia winning. If you missed that, go check out that full breakdown. But at the end of the day, it's going to be incredible. Enjoy the football. Leave all of that stuff by the wayside. Leave all of the crazy stuff that's going on with the sport and all of the negatives that are going on with the sport right now. Put it aside and enjoy these games this Saturday. We will be back tomorrow to talk about all of the stuff you guys need to know and get you ready for that finally on Saturday. But thank you once again for listening to the GSMC College Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly want. I promise you there's plenty of time to talk about NIL and the transfer portal and all of that craziness a little bit later. Right now, we're going to talk about football, and we will be right back to do that tomorrow. So I will see you then.